I still haven't heard anything back from Springbrook after they said they would consider, or they asked me what it would take to keep our business. And while I was a little bit demanding, I was realistic. All I had to do was, clean it up for nothing. I mean, they can't charge a city any more than they already have, and to fix the systems as they are, so they work for cash basis. And they have to compete with the other software companies on their annual fees, which is, theirs is twice as high. So the one question they did answer, or said they would answer, was go to their board and ask if they could reduce their fees. They never called me back. And it's been over a week and a half. So I think they're out. I mean, I think they're pretty much saying, we're just not going to bother. We had Mark Fletchlin in to give us a presentation from P.C.S. And before that, I think it was last Monday, we had Vision, and they did theirs on called WebEx. And so we looked at both. I actually let the two staff members that are involved with this, Pam and Angelica, have as much of the decision making as I did. And after Mark came in and gave us a presentation, from what we saw and what we understood, all the questions that were answered, and Angelica asked about 20 questions, specific ones to both companies. And I asked about 5, and P.C.S. answered them all. Vision tried, but really couldn't, and they didn't really have a solid product to show us like P.C.S. did. So for us, it comes down to P.C.S. will enable us to do the job you need us to do, to bring the city's financial reporting back to accountability and have integrity, in our opinion. So do you have any questions? Or and then Mark Fletchlin is here, by the way, sitting over there in the red shirt. He's here to answer questions to the representative for P.C.S.
I just have a couple after looking through this. So the permitting, this wasn't included in the previous packet, or in the
Correct.
previous proposal. Can you explain
Yes.
kind of what that includes and the cost associated with it?
Okay. The cost associated with it, and I'm not looking at my dollars here, I have it somewhere here, but it's about $10,600, right?
Give or take, yeah.
Okay. It also increases the annual maintenance by about $400, $400 or $500.
A little more than that. I believe it's roughly around $1,000.
Okay. So there's the 2 increases. Well, how this came to be was when Vision came in, they brought another contractor, if you will, subcontractor who did permitting, and so they said, we brought this guy with us because we thought you might be interested in permitting. And so I called Ken in to look at that. I don't have a lot of experience with permitting as far as that aspect of it, so he looked at it and he really liked it, but it was $44,000. So I said, yeah, that's going to be on your wish list, because I don't think we're going to even present that. So when Mark came the next day, I asked him if they had permitting. I said, bring it with you. I talked to him the day before. I said, could you bring it just in case? And so he did, because Ken was very interested, and so I had Ken look at it, and he really liked it. And so the cost of it, I think it is, it's expensive, there's no doubt about it, this whole package is, but it's it's competitive with Vision, and those are the 2 we were looking at. Vision's about the same price without permitting. So I talked to the Public Works Director, Ken, quite a bit about how important this was to him, and I also spoke to one of his staff, Wanda, who's a permit tech. And it just seemed like it would be something that would be a good deal to have now to help the system work together, to help. She right now, Wanda, keeps track of all the permitting on an Excel spreadsheet. And I thought that makes it really difficult for somebody else to know what's going on besides her. Okay, and this way, we have it in the system, so if she's out of the office, somebody comes in, and as I understand it, makes a deposit, it's in the system, we know what to do with it. If she's not, they have to come back later and deal with her when she's there. So that's part of it, and Ken will speak to more of that if you have more questions, actually, if you want to answer some of those, why it's important to you.
If you have any questions on that, I'm more than happy to answer. I emailed, and if you want to print a copy, I have a copy of the permits year-to-date for this year and also 2013, or 2012. Year-to-date, we're at about $38,000 in revenue just in building permits alone. The permitting system that they offer will also allow us to track code enforcement violations and things like that too. So it's not just a building permit. It can do building permits, right-of-way permits, mechanical and plumbing permits, and we can be able to do all this stuff online, which will cut some costs in that way. And then also tracking them is gonna be a lot easier.
So looking back to the workshop agenda on the 3rd, the total for bias is $79,000. And for the packet that we have now, the total is $100,000. So how does...
Oh, okay, let me explain that. There were a few options that we needed to make sure that the software did everything we needed. And bias was a little low with the original bid. They were included on the side of the bid, but I didn't include that when I met with you because I didn't know at the time. And so after meeting with Vision and understanding what they brought to the table, and then I spoke to Mark and said, well, Mark, we're going to need, there were a couple examples. One was, let's see if I can look at them. I have it right here in front of me. Utility interface and online payments. We needed that, and that wasn't included. That was another $5,000. And then, of course, the $10,600 for the permitting. So that increased the price. Plus, it drove up the annual maintenance from about, I think it was $5,700 or so at that time, and now it's $78. So those increased all across the board.
But still half as much as Springfield.
Yes, definitely. And so to understand, if we had kept Springbrook, we would be paying them about $16,000 in November for next year's fees because they charge you in advance. Bringing bias on, we're not paying anything for maintenance this year. It's all starting next year, and that'll be the $7,800. So if you think about the $15,736 this year, and then every year about $7,500 savings, pretty much it kind of takes care of itself in a few years that we have new software that works. Yes, Jeff.
On the permitting software, I know when we talked about Springbrook permitting, one of the features was it would provide the reporting automatically to the county for valuation upgrades.
Yes.
You just do that as well?
Yes.
Great.
The other thing, and Mark can answer these questions probably on the committee a little bit better than I can, but we already paid for Springbrook permitting, we just never implemented it, which is kind of a sour thing.
Richard, when you first presented this to the finance committee, it was $40,612.50.
Right.
Now we're at $100,000?
No, okay. Well, first of all, let me explain. What we're really at is $65,000. The other figures I'm adding in there are the annual maintenance plus you're losing, so let's go across.
So maintenance wasn't included in the original $40,000?
It was included if you went down the stream, but just looking at the one-time cost, it was about $40,000, correct. So there was a few things that were missing from that. It was the maintenance, it was the online option, it was permitting, and those are things that we added. And I don't do this without, thinking, we thought it through as far as we had to make sure that we had the software that did everything we needed. And so the $40,000 was short, and that's why I talked to Mark about saying, okay, we need more than what you're providing. I need to make sure that what the city gets will provide what we can do, what we have to do by state law and for the council, and for the mayor. And so and I said, and these two side items that you listed but you didn't put in your bid, we're going to need them, and they were $2,500 each. And so I said, I need a new bid so that I can bring it before the committee. I think I might have shared it with you last week when we talked about it, but I'm not sure, because I just met with Mark that day. And okay, so I'm not trying to pull anything. I'm really just giving you the best options here. We can, it's up to you, obviously, if you want to have the permitting or not. But it's still cheaper than Vision and Springbrook. Because, Vision doesn't even offer permitting without paying $44,000 for it. And so I just felt to have full disclosure to say this is what would be the complete cost of the complete package.
Totally confused here. This figure we're looking at here, 100,000. Now, that does not include the permitting.
Oh, it doesn't. It includes permitting.
It does include.
Yes.
Okay. Now, we're looking at Springbrook at 78.
That's just for maintenance. over the next 5 years.
Ken tells us that we've already paid for, permitting, so we just not use.
Well, right.
So, why are we buying permitting again, where we already bought permitting from Springbrook? Why don't we just,
The reason we can't use Springbrook's permitting, it was never completely installed, number one. Number two, is what I understand, again, I haven't spoken to you about this. We did some research today, and they did charge us for some product, but it wasn't complete. It was a workup to get to a complete permitting software package, and I think it was somewhere around $2,000 for literally just to work it up to see if it would work with our city. That's as much as we know, because we did some research into the files over the past 3 years, and that's all we found. Now, as far as speaking to Springbrook, and I think I've explained it, but is that it doesn't work. It's not working right now. And so what we're left with is staff doing extra time, overtime in some situations to get the job done. I'm working on doing manual financial reports because Springbrook doesn't have the wherewithal to do it because of what's happened in the past and the way it's an accrual system, which, you know, is something we never needed, but it also makes for more work. And the auditors don't need it for us to have it either. So I have a reference from another city. I think I told you about that. I called one city and two smaller cities, and that the auditors were very pleased that they had bias instead of other options. They said that was the best option. Without saying it by name, they said, we're glad you made the choice you did. I don't say this easy because I know it's a lot of money to spend, and it's the cities, and it's, you know, you feel like you've been there before and you bought a package in Springbrook, and you know, it's really sad that it's gotten to this. But I can promise you that with the new software, you have the reporting, you have less hours used, and you have the integrity back in the financial department that you need. And no, I'm not all about spending money either. I'm just all about getting it working the right way, so we don't have to spend money.
So, and I apologize for being late, you may have already covered it. Stepping back to the kind of 10,000 foot level, the way I understand the problems that we have with Springbrook is the most basic, we're a cash-based accounting system, and it's designed for GAAP accounting. And that's where most of the trouble comes in. Cities that use GAAP accounting, Springbrook works fine, right? And in my day life, I work in a little bit in this arena. State auditor's office is in the middle of announcing that they'll be imposing adverse opinions for cash accounting jurisdictions because they don't have GAAP reporting. It's some standard that they don't have to abide by. And it seems like the trend is nationally, those, even the small jurisdictions that are cash accounting are going to be gradually but steadily forced into GAAP accounting as much as they can. Instead of investing in different software that meets our cash accounting basis, if we think that's the way the trend is going to go, is it a wiser move over the long run to transition from cash-based accounting to GAAP accounting?
I thought about that, and I've spoken with some of the auditors, and what I've gotten is we're not, at least what they've told me is that we're not looking at making cities go to accrual accounting if they don't want to. Now, I have spoken with some cities that use Springbrook that are cash accounting, but they're larger, like Monroe and Fife, and they actually have always done accrual. They just change it to cash for the auditors. So, but let's go back to the premise that it's all about it being an accrual system and that's why it doesn't work. That's not true. Part of it is that the information that was first set up in the system is not good. And when I say that, I mean it's not, how do I put it simply, it's never balanced, and I don't know, I wasn't here to see how other finance directors did it or what they did, other than to see what was happening under Betty. And she took a sinking ship and kind of been going down, and so as far as the finance reporting area goes. So when you look at that aspect of it, and when you look at the city doesn't have, it reports everything else on cash, having to try and balance it in accrual when it never balanced anyway has made it doubly hard. So I am perfectly comfortable with accrual accounting, and like I've said, if the system was balancing when I came in, I would make it work. But I've talked to Springbrook, I've talked to cities that went from Springbrook back to a cash accounting, and what they know, and they've confirmed what I thought, that the auditors are still wanting cash accounting. And if there does come a day when you're saying, like Gatsby passes a law saying all cities, no matter what size, have to go to accrual, then Bias will be able to do that with us. But at least it'll have been something that we're working with that's successful. That's my biggest goal here, is not to spend money on new software because it makes me feel good about getting, easier work to do for right now. It's to get us reconciled and balanced on a monthly basis and to go forward from there. So let's say we did that, and then in 2 years, that Gatsby does pass that law. Well, then we would have to go back to Bias and say, we need you to make it accrual. But for the time being, I would do it manually, because it's not rocket science, as far as that aspect of it goes. I don't see our state auditors doing that, but I'd love to get together with you and talk to you about what you've heard, so we could share, and I could talk to the auditors about that. That is really important, but what I'm saying is right now, when the auditors come in, they'll be here probably in November, maybe late October. They're getting a little frustrated with the problems that have been happening, and after speaking with Springbrook as much as I have, and what I've gotten from them, there's no reason we should be doing business with them. And that's my primary concern, is having somebody that not only has a good product that we can use, but that is responsive to our needs. And I wish we could get money back, but at least we can stop the bleeding by not spending the almost $16,000 this year. And that's kind of the way how I justify doing this, because like I said, in a 5-6 year period, you're paying for it. So, but I do hear your concern, and I do want to address that, so we will do that. But I've spoken with Mark, and I said, what if this does happen? And he said, we'll always make it so they have like 200 customers in our state, cities and counties and whatnot, and they're not going to just drop it. They're going to make sure that it works. And that's the best I can understand that part. So.
Concern I have is the cost. Approximately, well, I'm hearing $100,000, and then approximately $7,800 of support a year.
Mm-hmm.
One, where do we have the budget for this? Where's that money coming from? And is it going to cost? How much is it going to cost us up front? I mean, do we have to cough up $100,000? Are we going to be able to, even if we prorate out 4 years, we're talking $25,000 plus $7,800. I know I've seen the list, but that's why I'm talking it out loud.
Right.
Where do we have the budget for this? I know what you're saying you feel we need for now and future, but I'm looking at, the reality. Where is the financial reality of our ability to make this change, and then benefit from it,
Right.
So, do we have the budget for it? What's it going to cost on a yearly basis? And are we going to see the results? Because a lot of us are weary in the mindset that, is this just the next thing, Is this Richard's view, you're coming in, don't get me wrong, I'm not pointing at you directly.
Sure.
But, most of us have been through 3 financial directors, and we've seen a lot of problems with account reporting this existing Springbrook, coming in here and trying to balance the budget, present us with a year-end accounts and stuff like that. So we know there's some problems with Springbrook with the previous financial directors.
Mm-hmm.
So we want something that's going to work, that's beneficial to the finance department and the city and reporting, making sure that we're balanced, but not bleeding in the prospect of making that happen. I'd rather pay you $10,000 a year in additional costs so you can put it over in Excel and make it balanced than pay $25,000 for software.
Right.
If that's what I got to look at.
That's what we're doing right now. Is paying me, not that much, but the company that provides me to do the service. But I understand what you're saying. And first of all, the $100,000 is if we do it on a 5-year basis, it includes the $7,800 a year for annual maintenance. So offset that by Springbrook right now in 5 years being $78,000, so you're only really spending $22,000 for a brand new product that works. I'm just wanting you to think of that. Now, I prefer, if the budget allows for it, and I believe it does, is to buy it out this year so that we see the savings every year thereafter. And also, it's always good to make the purchase. You do save $3,000, which is something, and it brings it down to 97, and you just don't have to worry about that every year. Your budget is not encumbered by that, $14,000 extra a year. So I look at it that way, but it's really up to the council. The budget, we're looking at last year's budget, and we're going to most likely we will have a budget amendment because the way that was done didn't have a lot of input from department heads, and so. But yes, there's been no money spent on upgrading any system for quite a while, except for on Springbrook, and that's unfortunate because it's been kind of a hole where you throw money into, unfortunately. So it's there, and I'll show you that when we prepare it for this year. I would like to see, if you do it in chunks, I would rather do it in the short term, maybe like 2 years, so you have it in 13 and 14. To put it in 1 year is good if you do it now, but I agree it's a hit.
Well, then what I'd like to see, we've talked about it. We've got a old proposal cost with what modules will be associated with that cost, so I'd like to see an updated, brought to the council of what buy us, if this $100,000 is gonna buy us.
Right.
From them, buy us. So, the other thing I would like to see is, some of the, how we'll benefit from it. I've heard Ken talk about it, but, it's really off the cuff. I'd like to see what that $10,000 software is gonna provide
For the permitting, right.
In writing. Here's what we're gonna see from this benefit. We'll do these permitting. This will be able to record, be able to go in and find this data faster than pulling up, what is the cost and benefit of that package? So, I think presenting that to council with your proposals of, like you said, $65,000 up front, or whatever the cost up front, and then we save, or here's the A, B, and C of how we can cost the budget, this thing out. So that's what I'd like to see presented to the council.
Can I address and talk about some of this stuff? I know that.
Sure. If it's okay with the council, I'll let you speak.
Talk. Okay. I think we're not comparing all apples to apples on the product too. So, for example, you're paying, it sounds like you were paying, I don't know the Springbrook numbers, but it's like $15,000 a year or $16,000 a year in service agreement. And that was not with the permitting system itself. So if our system, if you were just to take our system and divide it out for 5 years, that's about, our system without permitting and everything is right around $45,000 without permitting. So I believe that's what he has here. It's got, if you look at your payments, well, first off, I got POs. So it's, okay, so say your agreement's $12,000, and then that got permitting in it, it's got permitting in it. So if I take $10,000 outside of that, that's $2,000 a year off of that. That's $10,000 for the payment itself. So $10,000, and I think you guys have the same bid in there, but that's $10,000 a year plus my service agreement, and the service agreement itself is going to be around $6,000. So it's right around the same price right now that you're paying Springbrook.
Can you explain what this original bid for $40,000 was? This is the number that I was hit with, and this is the number that I was expecting.
Sure.
And I came in tonight, it's $100,000. It's like, really,
Well,
wow.
it's not. It's what they're doing is down here, see the maintenance support agreement, $5,000. He's taking that times 5 years and saying if you paid all your service agreement for 5 years, it's going to be $25,000 on top of that. That's where he's coming up with the number, and then he's adding permitting into it. So it's coming up with higher numbers.
So that would be,
So your payment is still,
okay, now we're at 75, where do you come up with 100?
well, and then some cities, I didn't know you guys did water billing itself when we initially went into this. And so there is a thing here, utility interface. So with the interface with your meter, handheld meter, it'll be $1,000 cost.
Plus I added tax as well.
And then online payments and everything. So even if, so these two things right here are not added into this, so that didn't know if you needed them or not when I initially said it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Of you, or I don't know who to ask it to. We're adding a lot of things in here, other than just the accounting software or what his purpose is. What is this gonna do to the utility department? Are we gonna no longer need them because it's now all tied into bias?
No, because they're still processing the billing now, up
Right.
front, and it'll function the same way. It's just the additional, if we decide to go with the original proposal, they wouldn't be able to do their job, basically, to bill water, and
How are they
And
doing
pay
it?
online.
they're using Springbrook.
They're using Spring.
Right, and it's utilities does work, that's about the only
Okay.
thing that does work for it, so.
Okay.
And payroll works, it's just,
If we were to take permitting out of it, because they're not using permitting right now.
So that was my other question, is why have we been paying for permitting with Springbrook and nobody's bothered to use it?
Well, I think,
That's a big waste of money.
I think that's a little bit of a misstatement.
it is.
We paid for, it sounds like, the groundwork to implement it.
Right.
Mhm.
But the rest of it, because we originally had looked at implementing it, and I think Cy stopped that, but we had started the process to implement it. We actually exchanged another module and said, we don't want this anymore, we want this. So we started down that path, and that path was stopped. So
Okay.
we're not paying a monthly recurring cost, we didn't pay installation and service, we paid totally the groundwork.
Okay. Now I got it.
For the initial module.
If you were to just take permitting out of it and figure out, because it went up to 100,000 because he's adding the service agreement for 5 years. He's trying to give you, in the 5 years, where are you gonna be? And so that's why it went to the $100,000, I think.
Well, do you understand my
Yeah.
concern, 40,000 to 100,000 in 3 days?
Yeah, well, it's not even proposed.
Yeah.
That was a little shock.
Yeah, it's actually, it is 40,000, and then you just pay a yearly service agreement for it. So, and he's trying to do a cost analysis over a 5-year
I was,
span.
right, I was comparing with the other two entities, I mean, the other two vendors to show you over the long term what the cost would be.
And so, right now, you're paying $16,000 or $16,000 for Springbrook a year, just for the service agreement. And what I'm saying is, you'll get, if you just made 5 payments to buy as a, I think it's gonna be roughly around $78,000 for the payment, plus the service agreement, you're still less, or very close to what you're currently paying Springbrook for what you have right now, without any difference.
But for a working program.
For a working program with us working on it. So, we are gonna come in and provide a lot of extra work that, you know, for example, we've had cities that have been in straits where they needed us to help them reconcile their books and stuff. So we'll come in, we'll get them tied out, we'll get it working for you.
Are you gonna get him up and running on permits and her up and running on water? Well, not her.
Well, yeah, water, the permitting is a question. The permitting isn't the primary focus at this point. Right now, the primary focus is your financials and getting those organized and straightened out, so.
Right, but if we do throw the permitting in the bucket, are you
Yeah.
going to come and help Ken get it all up and running?
Definitely. It would be February, March time. We wouldn't want to focus on the financials, get it going, capture seating set up, so everything's flowing into the capture seating to the front counter, and then we work with the permit tech. And then we'll work with their county. Algona uses our permitting system, they use the financial system too. So, and then we work with their county to get their county reports, and we bring that into the database for parcel information. So, and then to address your concern about the cash and the accrual system, if you realize and you start looking at the cash-based manual for the bar system is starting to go to more of an accrual functionality. And what does that mean? That means you're tracking your assets. So you know what your assets are in the city, you're tracking your liabilities, and you're reporting that information. So it is going, and we do see it, and we do have solutions for that, for a modified accrual system. But here's the thing, is why would you put an undue burden on your city to report accrual to the state if you don't have to? And the state, about 5 years ago, came out and said, we will no longer require accrual reporting to us if you want the city of Seattle to be that way. They're not going to do it because of some of their bonding sources and whatnot, but it doesn't make sense for a big city. But for small government, it makes a lot more sense because you can get information a lot faster and a lot quicker to your financial reporting. And so we're seeing a huge trend to go to that method. But it's not true cash, it is modified accrual type cash, where you still are identifying all the assets you have in your city and how they're depreciating and stuff. And so we have a method for that. Our CPAs have addressed that in our accounting system to do that. So we'll help you, support you through that process, and we work really closely with the state to ensure that. It is in our best interest too, though, like Richard was saying, that if the state changes, which they changed all the reporting requirements last year, we changed all of our reporting to meet that. So it wasn't a burden, necessarily an additional burden on our users. Our software changed that reporting requirement. So they changed all the coding a lot of the codes that you reported to the state, they changed all those, which kind of could create havoc in your codes, because one year it's this code and previous years it was these codes. And so now everybody's having to go change them, but then they're losing the link to the previous years. So our system said, well, this year it's what this is, and then next year we'll alias it so you can just see it in your 5-year report. And we've handled that. We did workshops for that. We've have classes in CTAC for that to help them kind of set their system up to do that, to where you could lose that.
And that's good to hear, because that's a big deal, that a big department recaps on a lot of jurisdictions. And I know we heard a lot about it too, with the amount of staff and we took to do that. So I guess, I have one follow-up question on that, and then another question. So when those types of changes, use the BARS manual update as a prime example, is that something that changes in the applicable state or federal law or other accounting standards that are just as binding on us as law changes?
Mm-hmm.
Do you all keep up with that and include those changes in your system free of charge, or is that something that you all come back and say, hey, listen, the game changed for all of us, we're happy to accommodate our system, but it comes with a price?
It's a good question. We include things that are mandates and requirements are included in our upgrade. As long as you keep current on your service agreement, they're included in. What we do find, though, people still want a little more hands-on. So even though, yes, our software does it, they also want us help them through it. So training, or actually not better than training, we did more of a workshop. So we took their data, put it on laptops, and we showed up around the state. So they worked on that at the workshops, and when they came back, most of their chart of account restructuring was all done. And that was, the cost for the workshop was $400. So $400 in your one day, and your chart accounts defined, ready to start budgeting for the next year was invaluable for our users. Very cost effective. So,
and if I can follow up, mostly on the pay in full option. I know that the $100,000 5-year figure is a little bit, it's easy to look more into that than we should.
mm-hmm.
But even as I go at the bid proposal at let's call it $60,000 purchase, the difference between a pay in full up front and the 5-year financing option is only $3,000 difference.
It's a 5%. Yep. We give you a 5% discount if you pay in full. And if you want to do it over 5 years, it's better for our taxes. So, if we don't get it all up front, that way I can manage the staff and bring staff on accordingly, and that helps us. To tell you the truth, not as much goes away. So, we give an incentive because we have to have an incentive to. Otherwise everyone just goes 5 years, so it's like, well, and so people can toy with that,
I mean, I guess my point is that it's either your financing costs are really, really low, or you're still retaining a portion. I can't decide if we want to buy our cars through you.
I bought a car, it was 1.9% interest rate, so I mean, it was really no interest hardly, for the cars, so it's a good point, but, and people, I have about 50-50 people that will pay 5 years, people that, just don't want to carry it on the books, and it's more of that than it is the discount, but it's kind of a little, here you go, we'll give you a little bit of a discount for it. So, yeah, good question.
And what's the timeline for implementation look like?
Well, the sooner you can make a decision, the faster, the better it is for everybody, because right now is a good time in the year to start the process with Richard. So if I can get a decision pretty quickly, I can get my programmers on looking at the data of Springbrook and getting that data out, and then we'll work with Richard to get it tied out. Right now, he's spending a lot of time. That's not going to, going forward, he's going to have to continue to do it with Springbrook, where if he can focus his time on BIS and getting it tied out and reconciled, that's complete, and then he's moving forward, and it'll be a lot easier. So to answer your question, it could be pretty within the next couple of weeks if we can get this going. So
He can be up and running.
he'll be up and running, yes, definitely. He'll be starting to, what we'll do is we'll go back to January, we'll import in all your transactions we can get in, and I'll have them start to reconcile to the bank statement, and they'll start to be able to provide financial reports from January going forward. That'll be like income statement reports and where your balances are. Okay. Because we truly, you have to go in, you look at the transactions on your bank statement and the transactions that got put into your financials, do they tie out, you have financial reports that tie out to those.
So to Richard's earlier statement though about one of the major problems here is that we don't balance. And I picked up that you go back to January, so are we then just doing adjusting entries to?
We look for cash transactions. We look for all your checks and all the the distribution of those checks. We look for all your revenues and all the distributions of those, we post those all into the system, and then we tie them out to your bank statements. And we just look at it, and then we develop a balance sheet. So we'd say, okay, on January 1st, what is our fund balances? What do our funds do? And we just move forward.
Sorry to interrupt, but that's the question. I think that's one of the major problems is how do we balance from here forward? I mean, it's not like our finances will stop clearly at the end of the year, but on December 31, 2012, we didn't balance.
Yeah. So there'll be a point in time, January 1st, there'll be some unreconciled dollar amount. We don't know what it is, and we plug it in, we'll say, here it is. And as we go through each month, maybe we'll be able to identify it. Hopefully we can get it down to a very little dollar amount, within a couple thousand, maybe to zero. Hopefully it's not big, and then that will be a decision that the board will have to make and say, okay, we have this money, but we're not going to keep it from helping us move forward. We have to move forward with it. So we'll get the books, we'll get a tying out date. This is January 1st is when we did the adjusting entry, and then we just move forward. And we can do that because we can look at the checks and we can figure out what the checks are and the revenues that were received and start to easily identify those for the year. But we're not going to go back year over year and over year, and before you know it, we're not getting anything.
But
we have to start from somewhere, and we can do that in the system.
Richard, you look like you wanted to say something.
Well, first of all, I didn't know he could get me up going that quickly, so that was a good, pleasant surprise. But the reason we're here and he's here is because he brought me in because somebody said it was off by $60,000. And I remember that because I came in and I saw much more of that. Now, 2012, I'm ready to close the books on it. Yes, it was out of balance, and I'm making an entry to balance it. Now, we can now isolate 2013, and having them do what they're going to do is like having an audit before the audit. Because the auditors won't be out here until probably, like I said, November. As soon as we have to give them the annual report, you have to first approve December's numbers. We're still a couple of meetings out from that. So having that would really even be a bonus to, getting it going. I mean, as far as we'll be able to have a new system that actually works. Meanwhile, we won't be down. We'll still have utility billing will still be up with Springbrook, and so will payroll. So there won't be, cash receipting. All that will be going on while this starts with that area. And then we move into the other areas once that's secure. But to me, it's a benefit. I'm sorry if the 100,000 was stark. Before, it was probably somewhere around 80 when you look at the end. I think you're looking at the beginning and then the end. So we can talk about that later. But I knew that bringing the 10,000 in was a little bit of a surprise, but it was something that I wanted the department head to have a chance to speak to. So I do apologize if that kind of caught you off guard. Like I said, I'm not trying to do a bait and switch. I really want what's best for the city and what's best to get our reporting up to snuff. So, that's all I had to speak to. Yes?
With Josh,
On the out of balance and the correcting entry and not knowing exactly where we were, is it still accurate to say that the cash balances to the bank, we just don't know where Springbrook's been reporting it? It's just putting it in the wrong place somewhere?
Right, and if you look back, what I've done is, since I've been here, is look back over the records over the years and the entries they've made. They being actually Springbrook sending somebody out here to say, okay, this is what you need to do, and they've been doing it. And I mean, you had money going to what's called, when you have profit, okay, retained earnings. You actually have money going to retained earnings. Well, cities don't have retained earnings, and if we did, we'd be in a lot of trouble. So they had to make hundreds of thousands of dollars of entries to get it out of there because it was an accrual system, and nobody recognized that early on. And so it's been, as you know, Josh, we've talked about it, it's been years of just having balancing entries at the end of the year, and so the problem is, had somebody wanted to take advantage, they could have, but it doesn't look like that happened because the auditors came in and looked at it and said, well, that's the way it appears to us too. I have a lot to talk to the auditors about because there's some things they did in the spot last year that I'm really curious about. But for right now, it's fixing the system so it doesn't do this anymore. I've never seen a city that went like this and stayed year after year and had no findings. That's just you've been kind of blessed in a way, but it's also a curse because nobody's looked into it.
So, Richard, you're saying that last year we had retained earnings and the state auditor didn't catch it?
They fixed it last year, they being
How did they fix
Springbrook.
it?
They made an entry to take it out of retained earnings and spread it through the fund. I don't know how they did it. I looked at it, I'm thinking, this is the most bizarre entry I've ever seen as an accountant. So, that's when I knew, that was the first time I began thinking, this is not working for the city, and whoever is working on it must not be an accountant, because you don't do that. You know, first of all, it had to be documented, and it kind of was, there's a folder for it, but I don't know that the auditors, if they saw it, they didn't say anything about it. I don't see any record of that. You know, usually they'll write it up in the management letter or something with the audit. So, all I can say is that I've seen some entries, and that's why, the only reason I made a balancing entry for the end of 2012 was because he's done it before. I got it down to 15,000, that's about as low as it's been in a long time. And after knocking my head and doing work and trying to figure it out, I just said, well, the cash is there because the cash is higher. So let's go with just balancing it to cash and move on to 2013, because I spent 4 or 5 weeks trying to come up with why I was doing this. But the way I finally, like Mark said, you can't let it stop you, have to keep going. Well, the city has let it stop, and the finance department has for about a year now. And so I realized that's what I needed to do next, was move forward into 2013 and start getting some numbers so you know where you're at. I'm still frustrated we don't know where we're at today, but we're going to know August numbers this week. I'm going to get those so we have an idea of where we are for the last quarter of the year. We need to know that so we can make budget amendments and prepare the budget for 2014. So there's a lot of reasons why I bring this to you, but that's the biggest part, is getting the work done on a timely basis, helping the staff, not just me, but the other staff members to be able to do their job, and Springbrook has not allowed that. And the contact with which we had is, you know, for me anyway, has been really poor, that they would try to save the city as a client. So, yeah, that's, you know, and I can promise you that if, you know, this is done, this is the last purchase we need to make on something like this for a long time.
Well, there's a couple of reasons. Totally in the Neverland here, which I read all the time with computers. Say the bias. Right here it says plus permits.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at $100,000 figure.
Right.
I'm told that includes permits.
Right.
Well, why does this say plus permits?
Because before, when I made that out, 2 weeks ago, when we had the workshop where we discussed this, I made one out without permits, and that was a lot less, and that was the one that Councilmember Garberding was talking about, where she said it was 40,000.
All right, okay.
Okay?
Now, Springbrook, 78,000.
That's for nothing. All that is for support. That's kind of not that great.
Okay, now, we have signed a whole bunch of different contracts and everything else with Springbrook. Is all those commitments gonna go away? Or
30 days.
Are we still committed out there?
No.
To something that's gonna come out of the woodwork?
I called them and spoke to the vice president, and she assured me, because I said, I have 3 contracts in front of me from 3 different years, and they have 2 different numbers. So I want to know which number. Is it 30 days, is it 60 days, and what's the hard date? And I pinned her down, and she finally said, okay, it's 30 days, and it's got to be before December 31st. So we, you know, it's sometime in November we let them know. I mean, I think they already know now, and I'm going to make sure if it's in writing, that's how they get it. You know, but if it has to be signed by the mayor, it will be. So we've done that, we've checked that out to make sure.
Okay, if we make this change, I would like to see that in writing from Springbrook also, not just from us
Okay.
to Springbrook.
Of course.
I want Springbrook to make a commitment to us. The next thing is, how much, you see, this is for nothing, and this $100,000 figure. Now, when Jim asked the question, as things change, are we going to be committed to buying new software to update and whatever? We got kind of a vague answer on that. I mean, as I go through this computer, that's, every time I turn around, something changed, so we got to spend another $17,000 or another $12,000. I mean, Trent's been on the council as long as I have the last go around here, and I don't know how much money we've spent for updating this package and whatever. I mean, it's been ridiculous. So, if we start to step up and update our system and stuff, any idea what our future additional maintenance update charges possibly would be? I mean, are we gonna talk about in the same period of time, having to spend another $50,000? You're shaking your head, no. Do we have that in writing or anything? I mean,
We have, here's what we do have, when I respond to that. We have the reputation by the other cities I spoke with. Their reputation is important in the state, as I thought was Springbrook, but apparently it's not as much. But not only do we have that, we have assurance that their annual charge is going to be set like $7,800, and if something changes, they're going to just see that through with us. And the training would be $400 a year right now for what you go and get as far as something changes with the system. So it's $400 a year, not $17,000 a year, and you're correct. Springbrook cost $50,000 in 2012. I looked at all the payments we made, the city made, and it was $50,000 for, a lot of it was for the upgrade, but a lot of it was, you're getting, I would say nickel and dime, but it's more like $20 and $30 for web charges. For people using the web payment system, we're getting charged $300 a month, every month. And so you add that on top, and no wonder it's been, the bleeding's been so severe. It's not going to be like that with P.C.S. I've been assured that through talking with Mark and with other cities that really, I mean, they say things that most finance people don't say, like we walk around telling each other we just love having P.C.S. I mean, who says that about a software system? But that's what she told me, and I was like, are you kidding? She said, no, I'm serious, because our life was a nightmare, and I can relate to that. It is, I mean, I like working here. I do enjoy it. But what I have to go through with Springbrook, I try and stay out of that system as much as I can, because I'm doing it manual anyway, so I print out the reports that I need, and then I just put it in Excel. But it takes me a lot of time, and there's so much more I can be doing, especially now that we have all the deadlines coming up in the next 3 months.
So to Clint's point, to go from version, just picking numbers here, version 7 to version 8, what's that look like with P.C.S? Is it included in the $7,800?
I can answer that.
monthly?
The only way I can answer that is by historical. And the last time we did this, it was actually going from a brand new technology to .NET and stuff like that. And we happen about every 7 years. Last time we only charged for what is, the license fees to run the system, and then some time. So the cost associated with that for a city like you was like $1,600 to do something like that. So it wasn't much. And that involved us being able to spend the time to convert your data and get it to the new technology. Because, Windows like XP is no longer going to be supported in a couple, it came out April of 2014, I think it is.
Oh, yeah, right.
I think it's when it's no longer supported. So, technology is going to change. I can't say there's not going to be cost, but the thing is we don't charge based on its history. We haven't charged hardly, to do that. I don't know what the future holds. I could sit here and tell you today that, it's not going to be that much, but I can just tell you what we've done.
So if we buy this program for $80,000 next Tuesday, in April, we're gonna get hit with another $1,600 because Windows is changing? Is that what you're saying?
No. That was an example of a technology that...
Well, you said something about April of 2014.
forced us to, that's XP Windows XP is no longer valid.
Okay,
Meaning that Microsoft will no longer support updates.
okay.
That you'll eventually have to update your system. That's nothing to do with us.
So at some point down the road,
There's
P.C.S.
technology-
may reach that point in 7 years, and we'll have to upgrade because they won't support that.
Okay, well, I thought he...
That's it.
There's technologies we run on,
April,
there's
we're gonna have
platforms
to
we
do
run on that eventually you're going to have, those technologies are constantly being updated. And the cycle tends to, we try not to change often, because we don't want to be on the bleeding edge, but every 7 to 8 years there's a definite technology change. There's a brand new Windows operating system, and there's systems that run on that we have to update.
Well, when's the last time you made your big change?
We did that 2 years ago.
Okay.
So, in 5 years from now, we'll probably see, there's more things going towards the cloud, and what is that going to, I don't know. We don't know what the future is going to hold. What I do know is in history, we haven't charged that much. And again, our client base, we have a client base that has 200 population cities, that it's all volunteer firefighters also, fire departments to cities, our biggest cities like Arlington, that's 18,000 population city. So we're very cost conscious in how we do things, and we know that our customers, are looking at all their pennies and stuff, and so we're trying to make it as effective as possible to do that.
Okay, now you mentioned something, if we make this decision, we change over, but this includes permits, yet we wouldn't be able to do anything with permits until, say, March or April of next year. So, are we paying for something that we're not gonna have access to use?
No, you wouldn't have to do that. And to answer your question on paying for stuff, I usually don't even charge you until you're live in the system. So, until you feel comfortable and confident in the system and it's working, and then I want you to feel comfortable with it before I'll send you get a bill. So, I'm willing to hold off on the whole payment itself. You know, you're allowed to pay for per diem travel costs for me to come, my direct costs that I paid trainers to come out, but I'll hold off on all those payments until Richard's starting to feel comfortable with things and he's gone live with things and utility billing's live and all those things, and then I'll charge. Then I'll send the bill. So.
Okay, well, we have a history here and never been comfortable with that.
Okay.
But maybe that's just because we use Springbrook.
Yeah. Well, at least you haven't paid as much as other software applications out there. There are some that are a lot more expensive than Springbrook. You know, we tend to be more local and smaller.
You had mentioned that you charge for a per diem for a tech to come out here, so that's separate than what's
That
in...
is separate from the bid, yes. So,
But I
and
thought
usually
you
we're out
had
on site.
support. That's not included in support?
If you have us come out from Spokane, then there's those costs that are associated with us coming out.
So when you come out to set it up, is that per diem or is that included?
That's per diem.
And how much is that? That's not included in this 100,000?
Yeah.
Okay, so how much is that, and...
On average, a new conversion from top to bottom is about $2,000 to $2,000.
So now we're saying, now we're up to $102,000.
Sorry. 102, well, yeah, if you're looking at the whole 5 years.
What other hidden charges are there that you're not,
Well, that
we're having to dig
That,
for?
it's not hidden. I mean, I understand your concern, but if you look at, in the bid, it does say per diem cost is billed separately. I guess it's a standard, you know, if you look at traveling and billing costs was on the bid itself, travel and lodging bill is incurred. It's there in the actual bid itself. That's, you know, and the other thing, as far as the utility thing was on the bid too, I put the utility on there, interface, and I put the online payments money was over to the left. It says it wasn't included in it. In your bid, I believe that you're seeing right there too. So, you know, I'm not trying to hide any fees. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. But, you know, it's hard for me to include all that together when there's, you know, it's all across the board different. Some people need an interface, some people don't. It's all to what type of system you have and how you're doing things. And that's why I put it there, this is sometimes a part of it. Per diem cost is a standard industry, it's a standard thing, and sometimes people have us come out more than others, and so it's really hard for me to put that in there and go, this is the fixed dollar.
Changing the per diem staff job, that's pretty, and that'll, I feel like that's.
Yes, you mentioned when you got their first sales presentation from Bias that it was done by WebEx?
No, that was from
Or was
Vision.
that was Vision.
Vision.
Do you do WebEx training?
We do a go-to-meeting, not go-to-meeting, it's a log-me-in session, and there's little icons that sit on your computer, and so a lot of times we do a lot of things remotely.
Yeah,
The
so
only
the
time
per
we're
diem
usually on site
you
is,
actually have to come out yourself.
yeah, the time when we come out on site is when utility billing goes live. Usually that's an essential time, and that's usually one of the few times. Permitting almost always goes remotely, because we can log in, one click, and we're watching your computer work. We can schedule it when the process happens. We're not dedicating a whole day of your time away. We're there working through the internet with you, and it's very efficient. A lot of times we're only out on site twice. So, and that twice is almost sometimes more than necessary. Sometimes we're on site on once, because we're a click away. You're clicking on the support while we're watching your computer. We can help you through the process. However, we found when cash receiving and utility billing goes live, we need to be on site for that, and it's usually a 3-day time period where we're on site. So that brings up a good question. So. The reason I didn't do WebEx, because I feel like it's important to be here and see things. I think there's something about being here.
So what's the council's pleasure?
I want to do some research myself, personally.
I think, Richard, like I said before, I'd like to see a detailed bid with, if the numbers are, so that, we can see from this chart where the numbers are. Personally, I think if we're gonna go this way, I have no problem paying it out over 5 years. You know, it's cheaper, and comparatively what we were paying for Springbrook anyway, you know. So we're not gonna see that much difference in what we were paying versus what we will pay. You know, so as far as the city's concerned and the citizens, are not impacting that much.
So, no, sorry, Gary, go ahead.
I think I would like to see a pro forma on the package outlining what it's gonna cost, all the costs, hidden expenses, and on the other side of the page, how much it'll save us in manpower, and hours, and efficiency.
Did you realize that's somewhat subjective? I mean, I can give you 1,000 hours, and, I mean, I could tie it down to what I've seen and what I've spent. Would that be good enough for you to do that? Because,
Well, part of the modules, as I understand it, is tied into the permitting department. Planning and permitting.
Mm-hmm.
So how many man hours is that gonna save
Right.
there? If we have a comparison of what it's gonna cost alongside of what it's gonna save, that reduces the cost overall.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd also be helpful to look at what the payment would be over 5 years. So if we decided to do 1 year, that's pretty obvious, but 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And then also, more specifically, where we're gonna pay for it. So if we decide to do a lump sum payment of $65,000 for next year, where does that money come from? You mentioned we haven't spent a lot of money on upgrades so far. What have we budgeted for upgrades this year? And then kind of break that out.
Sure.
Kind of along to Gary's point, is, what's Springbrook costing us? I think this is pretty good, but just give us an idea of what to expect when budget season comes. Josh?
Yeah, and then also, I'm assuming with things like utility billing, that doesn't get necessarily all general funds, some of that comes out of the enterprise fund.
Right.
So it's not
Water,
not all
sewer.
it hits the general fund.
Exactly.
And if we decide to do permitting later, what does that look like? Is it a pretty easy add-on module?
Can you speak to
Yeah.
Okay. So if we, I hate to add too much work, but what's it look like with and without permitting?
I can do that really easy without. I mean, that's pretty much what I had before. There were a couple modules that were missing because we do need it. So it's about, with that and maintenance, you can bring it to around 11 less, for sure, and then tax, so you're talking maybe 12, somewhere in that area. So, but I'll put this together.
Yeah, it'd be nice just to see, with permits, without permits, what the monthly cost looks like with and without permits, just to kind of get a good
Sure.
whole picture. Josh?
On the permitting question, I'm assuming that having it integrated with the main accounting system and having all the reporting and automated timing and everything isn't just going to be a matter of saving man hours, but will also avoid some of the past issues that have had to come to council for permission to correct, financial impact of, oops, we never finished that, or, oops, they should have had to pay for that, and we paid for it. We'll notice sooner when things are still under permit, when things are still open.
It's just like years ago when they came out with cash registers and all the different drawers. They come around and sell it to you. Okay, that's gonna save your theft. I mean, like you go in the morning and ask that cash register, what drawer was somebody in last night? Your computer is gonna tell you, oops, you forgot to put something in, unless you find it and realize you forgot to put it in. I mean, computer ain't gonna figure that out on its own.
I would assume, and I could be wrong on this, that it will modern systems do actually set hold files to remind you of things that need to be done.
Yep,
It also makes it harder for you to do fraud, which,
yeah.
and if you make it harder, it makes it harder for them to, they're not just gonna easily go. If you put money in front of you all the time, eventually you might take it, but if you put it in a lockbox and you have to find a key for it and find the password and get into it, it's gonna make you think about it a little bit more. So versus having a non-integrated system, it's a lot easier to do adjustments and to do things differently, so it's, it's like dangling the fruit. Eventually someone's gonna take it, I don't know if they will, but it's, having it fully integrated creates tighter internal controls in the system, makes you really think twice before you do something.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the type of service that you provide. When I was a kid, I first started to drive, I'd go in for $1, get 5 gallons of gas. They'd come out and check my oil, and they'd check the coolant, and they'd check the air pressure in the tires. And that was called a service station. They provided that service. And then we got a bull to service our cows. So what type of service are we going to get?
Moving along smartly. So, is council comfortable with if we get this information moving into next week for at least discussion, potential action, rather than waiting 2 weeks?
We do have a finance committee meeting tomorrow night, so that helps with the process, just let's say you know.
So we can add it to the agenda if everyone's comfortable, and we can always move it if need be. Any objections? Okay. Thank you very much.
Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
Gary? Did you know that there's a finance meeting for tomorrow night? Are you able to make it?
Yeah.
You are, okay.
Okay, so